This week I read The Secret Life of Walter Mitty by James Thurber and then The Short Life of Francis Maycomber by Ernest Hemingway. When reading the story of Walter Mitty, I was immediately reminded of myself a little bit. I often find myself daydreaming and kind of imagining different scenarios or stories, which kind of seem to be what Walter was doing throughout his story. Just like him, I kind of don't really realize that I'm doing it all the time, and I can get carried away. And this is kind of just like what he did at the beginning of the story, where he was driving and imagining that he was a doctor, and he almost ran off the road because of it. In this story, I think that I identify more with Walter than his wife. His wife seems to be more reality centered. She focuses more on the real world, and she kind of makes Walter kind of snap out of it. She asks him questions about what he's doing, why he's maybe staring off into space or loses track of time and things like that. And I don't think that's always there. That's more focused on me. I think that I would be more relatable to Walter in this story. I also think that because, this is personal, that I just like love to read. And so I think that daydreaming about the different stories that I read, and that's just kind of how my imagination gets kind of carried away. Um, and I think um, in the end, Walter kind of gets a chance to stand up to his wife, to tell him what he thinks, and that sometimes he just likes to be in his own world just to think through things himself, which I think I can relate to a little bit. I know that I'm a little introverted, and that I don't always like to talk to people, but sometimes I just kind of like to be in my own world. And it kind of seems like maybe he's just needs a break. And sometimes, I need a break. I think for me, maybe sometimes schoolwork overwhelms me a little bit, and so it's nice to like take a walk and kind of think about something that like brings me joy or something like that. Um, I think today this story could be pretty relevant, because sometimes people might try to escape from reality just by kind of like thinking up different stories, kind of like what Walter did. This could be because they're maybe overwhelmed from work or things in their personal life, or maybe they're just bored. But I think that people today could really resonate with Walter, and this story. When I was reading The Short Happy Life of Francis Maycomber, I mostly felt bad for Francis, because, he seemed kind of afraid of killing the lion, and the other two main characters, his wife and the other hunter, Mr. Wilson, seemed to look down on him because of that. And it kind of seemed like they were talking about him and kind of conspiring against him. And this kind of made me feel bad for Francis mostly, and made me dislike Mr. Wilson and Margot, his wife, for looking down on him and kind of talking about him. And, it didn't really seem like they really cared about him. But according to what like I have observed of these characters in the story, I don't think that I am particularly similar to any of these characters, but I think if one was most similar to me, it would probably be Francis because um, I am more introverted, not necessarily cowardly, but I'm a little less authoritative, which I kind of noticed he aligns most with, or aligns most with him in this story. Um, and I think I'm very dissimilar from Marco. She seems to kind of make fun of her husband throughout the story. I didn't really or I don't really think that I would enjoy doing that to someone in real life. So I don't think that I'm that similar to her. Um, in the end of the story, Margot ends up shooting her husband just after he gets up the courage to kill the buffalo. Um, at that moment, I felt deeply sorry for Francis. And then throughout the story, I wasn't really able to relate or identify with Wilson. He appears to sort of be standing on the outskirts of the couple's marriage, not really engaging except with Margot, which made me think he was kind of conspiring against Francis. I obviously cannot fully relate to this specific story, but I think people today maybe could to parts of the story. If people maybe have a rocky marriage, or maybe people are afraid of doing things, that maybe frighten them, and maybe they're made fun of for those things. I think that can certainly be something that people relate to today. Um, Overall, I think I was able to relate more to The Secret Life of Walter Mitty than I was to the story with Frances May Cumber. More specifically, I resonate the most with Walter, the character, over his wife, because I too like to daydream and think up adventures in my head and things like that. But overall, I think both of these stories can still connect to people today in vastly different ways, but I still think that people may want to escape reality, like Walter, or maybe are having marriage troubles, or are afraid to do things that may frighten them or are made fun of, just like in the story, The Short Happy Life of Frances May Cumber.